Last week, a friend asked me what I've been shooting lately, and without thinking about it, I joked, "Oh, I don't have time to take photos. I spend all my time writing about photography." Because as I have been working on the ninth edition of Complete Digital Photography, this is not it, this is the eighth edition. This was the 600-page edition. I'm trying to come in shorter than that. But still, even going for 400 pages takes a long time, so much time that I really have not been able to take any time to go out and practice my craft. And it does feel a little strange to be saying, to hear myself speaking in this voice of, well, as an expert, let me tell you this is how you should do it, and yet I'm not doing it at all. However, I have come to believe over the years that whether you are a photographer or a writer or a musician or a dancer or an engineer or a chess player, anyone who engages in a creative process, we're all trying to solve the same problems, and we're all running into the same obstacles and the same issues. It's interesting to go and look at other disciplines and see how they address those problems, because some disciplines bring up problems in a different way, ways that allow you to kind of see a different perspective on them and gain a different tack in fighting them. If you've never written a book, it may surprise you to know that the majority of the time spent in writing a book is actually reading what you've written. That's why I refer to writing a book as a slog. It's not the writing part that's a drag. I actually love the writing part. And I say slog and I joke about how it's so hard. I really like the process of writing books. I wish I could have the opportunity to do it more often. But man, rereading the stuff you've written, you have to do it so much. As you're working on a particular chapter, you have to reread it and reread it, and then maybe you get to a later chapter and go, oh, well, I think there's a better way. I could have done that earlier chapter. So you go back and you read it again. If you ever manage to get to the finish point, you send all that off to an editor. They read through it and then send it back with all these questions. And so you have to read it again. And so you go through all that and then you send it off to the editor again. And in the case of a technical book, they then send it to a technical editor who sends it back to you with a bunch of questions. So you have to read it again. Then you send it off to your publisher and they send it to a copy editor who sends it back to you. Then you send it off and they give it to a designer who sends it back to you. Every time I've written a book, when I've gotten to the end, people say, well, you're finished. Congratulations. That must feel really great. And all I can think is, no, I keep sending the damn thing away and people keep sending it back to me. By the time the finished thing lands on your desk, you kind of have this reflex to mail it off, but now there's nowhere for it to go. And it's really not that satisfying because you're just so tired of reading the thing. I bring this up right now because I've been thinking a lot about something I'm noticing rereading the 8th edition. So 8 editions of this book over almost 20 years. Each one of those editions, through the process of it being created, has gone through being read by 4 or 5 different pairs of eyes, and yet still, after all that time, I can open it up and go, oh wow, that paragraph's kind of clunky. How did that survive 8 editions of being read by 4 different people? How do these rough spots stay in this? And I've been paying attention to my own process as I reread the stuff that I'm working on, and I realize rereading is very different from reading. When you reread, you know what the goal is. You know what you're trying to say. And so you reread something with the mindset of, is this leading to that goal that I want? The reader doesn't know what the goal is. And so they're coming through it in a very pure state. When I'm rereading it, I can quickly see something and go, oh yeah, that's important. That feeds the goal. And oh yeah, so does that, and so does that. I'm not so much experiencing it as the rereader would experience it as I am just kind of corroborating my own ideas or in a way patting myself on the back. I think the same thing is true with photos. When you look at a photo a lot and you come to an idea of what it is you're trying to say with a photo, it blinds you to things that can be in that image. You know what the goal is. You've already decided that this little bit of vocabulary in the photo feeds that goal, and so you kind of set it aside and you don't look at it anymore. That is why, just as I can come back to this book fresh and read it in a completely different way, it's really important to set your photos aside when you're working on them and come back to them with fresh eyes. That's difficult to do in this age of Instagram and social media where we all run home and want to get images up as quickly as possible. I would really encourage you to experiment with the idea of taking an inordinate amount of time with your images. I mean, take them out of your camera, copy them to your computer, and don't look at them. Don't look at them for a month. Don't look at them for 3 months. Then look at them, because now you've forgotten what your initial impulse was when you were shooting. Now you can take a fresh eye on editing. Or if you feel like, no, I need that impulse that I was shooting with to be able to do my editing, great. Do that initial pass, then set them aside. Come back to them later. I'm not saying this needs to be your standard workflow, but I think it's a good exercise to remind yourself of what it feels like to really be able to see a photo. I'm going to go do that now instead of going back and rereading the chapter that I'm supposed to be reading.